This is an overview on how to answer question 2 of the British Depth Study on paper 2. The question will always be phrased just like this. Explain why. You may use the following in your answer. Stimulus point 1, stimulus point 2. You must also use information of your own, and it will always be for 12 marks. The idea of this overview is that you understand how you're expected to answer the question to get the most marks possible. As you go through the questions on the website, you will now know what you need to do. 6 of those marks will be awarded for AO2, which is for analysis of causation. This question is all about explaining why. It's about showing how factors combine to bring about an outcome. So you need to analyse those factors to show how they led to a certain event or development. This brings us on to AO1, which is also worth 6 marks. This is for your knowledge and understanding of the period. Now, those factors might come from the stimulus points that you're given in the question, but more importantly, from your existing knowledge of the topic. It's also important to note that the AOs depend on each other. Now, this means that no matter how well you perform in one of the AOs, if your performance isn't as good in the other, it will hold you back from progressing into the higher bands. And this is called a mark ceiling, and that's something you'll see crop up in a few of the mark schemes. For example, an answer with no AO2 can't score any higher than the lowest band. So it's really important that when you're analysing causation, you're thinking about the factors from your existing knowledge and how they can answer the question. When marking this question, the examiner will first decide which band your answer fits into. Now, this is a broader set of criteria that you will have achieved, and then they will decide within that band which mark you have achieved. So if you've done most of it well, they might give you the lowest mark. If you've done all of it quite well, they might give you the middle mark. And if you've done all of it really well, but not quite enough to push you into the next band, then they might give you the top mark. So let's take a look at the bottom 2 bands on the screen. For AO2, you might notice that your answer, though it answers the question, is perhaps straightforward and needs a little bit more development. You might need to be giving a little bit more detail to push your answer into the higher bands. In terms of AO1, you might need to be applying more knowledge and more evidence of your understanding, again, to push yourself into the higher bands. But overall, a relevant answer to the question, which shows some knowledge of the topic. To move into the top 2 bands, you'll notice for AO2 that you need to have a clearly organised answer. It needs to be logical. It needs to show that you've thought really carefully about how best to structure your answer. Your explanation of causation will be well analysed and show that you've thought really carefully about what the question is asking you to do. For AO1, you'll be able to demonstrate a really good understanding of the topic and pick relevant details to explain your answer and explain your thinking really clearly. It's also important to note here the mark ceilings. So remember that if you don't speak about anything beyond the stimulus points, you can't score above the middle mark in the band. So bringing in your existing knowledge is really important to push up your marks. Here is an example of question 2 from the Henry VIII and his ministers option. Explain why Cromwell rose to power. You may use the following in your answer. Act of Appeals, 1533. Membership to Privy Council, 1530. You must also use information of your own, 12 marks. Here are some points that you could have made in answering this question. Let's look at the first one together. He became a Privy Councillor in 1530. Now, that was one of the stimulus points given to us in the question, but what's important is what comes next. They explain that this gave him closer access to and influence over Henry and his decisions, and therefore made him more powerful. So you can see how you've taken either a stimulus point or some existing knowledge and used that to explain your answer, explain what they're asking you to get at in the question. Now, with this example, think about how you build a paragraph or a bigger point around this single point. So you might say that Cromwell used his influence over Henry to become more powerful. Your evidence for that point could be that he became a Privy Councillor in 1530, and then you explain that that gave him closer access to Henry and therefore be able to exercise more power. It's not enough just to list facts to show off what you know. You need to explain it and explain it in a way that is relevant to the question.